we're talking about the moves post-elections, right, and what brokerages anticipate. And we're starting with a conversation on how the options patchwork kind of builds together, right? So let's start with that. And I must say that it's a bit of a cliche to start with. History does not repeat itself, but it sometimes rhymes. Maybe that's something that could happen this time around as well.
Yeah, so just a tale of a few charts, Alex, based on two reports that came in from JP Morgan and Jefferies. So one, the implied move for 2024 elections versus 2019 and 2014, and the chart will come up on your screen, and that tells you how this time around the scene seems to be relatively muted compared to what we've seen in the past. Now, don't quite know if this has got to do with the belief that this time around it's a more certain outcome than what it was in the past. So therefore, possible to compare what 2024 will show versus what 2019 or 14 will show.
And the global setting, could that also be, of course, we're attributing quite a bit to the general elections and the outcome therein, but I guess there are more significant global events that are taking place now than there were in 2019, certainly.
Yeah, in which case, and again, if anything, world should have been higher, and everything else notwithstanding, things should have been volatile more, maybe. Yeah. But quite interestingly, and the comparison is interesting from JP Morgan, right? I mean, this is a note that they came out with, I think, on the April 18th, if I'm not wrong. Largely constructive, but they're saying that the walls don't seem to suggest that something dramatic. Then it's just the MSCI India relative return to MSCI Asia ex Japan that has typically been seen during this period, Alex. And again, this is a chart that will come up on your screen, something that Jefferies laid out. And it's interesting how they note what some of these returns seem to imply. And it's not that relative to Asia ex Japan, there has been a rapid rise of sorts that is coming, and therefore does it set the stage for maybe a post-election rally?
Interesting. Okay. So, but then, let's talk about also the sectors, because you've highlighted that as well, and how each of the sectors has moved in the 6 months after the 2019 elections. Is there any possibility of that repeating itself?
Yeah, so the only thing is, it's great to look at the past, right? 2019 saw this happen. Was the narrative and the promise made post-2019 different than what it is right now? I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't know what everybody else, viewers' thoughts are, but it almost seems to be a done deal that everything related to manufacturing, infrastructure plus energy seems to be, and defense maybe, seem to be the buzzwords this time around. So yes, interesting to note that Jefferies is putting that out as the key themes that did well. I mean, and energy had a great run then too. Can energy have a good run right now? That's one key thing. A clutch of stocks didn't have a great run then. Do you want to see an Oncore, or do you expect to see an Oncore this time around? But it's an interesting data point that people should keep an eye out for.
And that kind of is borne out by the kind of capex spend that has played out over a period of time.
Yeah. In fact, so the JP Morgan note talks about India's climbing capex,
right?
And it'll be interesting to see if indeed that move continues and whether private capex comes to the fore. I think that will be the other interesting piece.
How important is the texture of that capex, though? Because we've seen certain spending of, and you mentioned energy. There is highways growth. Railways was a major thrust area, and also, what else was there? There was. Railways primarily.
Yeah, railways
and defense. Sorry, I'm missing defense.
Yeah,
I knew I was missing one key element.
Yeah, the only key thing is that does private capex in a meaningful way come to the fore? Right. Part one, and does that capex benefit banks, because hitherto companies are shying away from taking bank loans. But I think the chart showed a lot, and the question only is that can it continue further. So,
you've spoken about China+1 here, and the idea is it going to continue to benefit certain sectors? Is that really a big talking point?
So manufacturers are talking about that. So for example, we spoke to Syngene and Lotus, right? A small example, but I'm just saying CDMO. And people are talking about how the Biosecure Act in the US leads itself definitely to a China+1 scenario wherein spends on CDMO could increase and some of these sectors could benefit materially. So that's CDMO. But beyond that as well, we've heard chemical companies talk about how European companies are wanting to outsource more from other destinations aside of China. Much spoken about, can India's manufacturing step up? Can the policy promise step up to say that we'll give you the infrastructure and everything, just come and manufacture in India? PM Modi seems to be at the forefront of saying that manufacturing is going to be the buzzword. Post-elections. Let's wait and watch.
And there's a lot that is happening in the undercurrents, right?
Yeah.
We saw headlines this morning of Tesla CEO heading to China just a week after he cancelled his India trip.
Yeah.
And of course, China opening its arms and saying, hey, come and invest here. So they're not going anywhere.
No, not at all.
The thing is, let's see if India can capitalize on that. And
Yeah.
the last aspect I think you've spoken about is per capita GDP to approach $4,000 by 2028. That's quite significant.
Yeah, and again, not something related to elections necessarily,
Yeah.
but certainly discretionary
A step
spend
in the
could-
right direction.
A step in the right direction, discretionary spend could go up. So watch out for all the players there.
All right, so there you have it. Of course, we're not saying that we know exactly how things will pan out. Nobody does. If we did, well, other people would, and people would make a lot more money than they're making right now. But having said that, let's set you up for the rest that you need to know.